On BBC2 shortly, Stop the Wedding tells 4 cautionary tales of marriages which didn't quite take place. Here on BBC1, it's time to join David Jacobs for Primetime.
Hello and welcome to Primetime. I trust that you've been able to avoid the flu. If you've got it, or perhaps are just getting over it, keep warm and get well soon. We'll be going to the dogs in this week's programme, or to be more precise, our canine friends will be joining us later. What have you got for us, Sheila?
Well, I'll be visiting a reminiscence centre in South London. Now, this is a special place where local people are encouraged to drop in and to talk about their ordinary lives. And not just that, but they then make little plays out of it for local school children to act out. It's a great way of learning history.
Is this where they go back to the wartime as well?
That's right. The one we're looking at today is all about being an evacuee during the last World War. So if, like my mum and her sister, you were bundled off to the train station, clutching your gas mask and with your little label round your neck, there'll be lots of memories later on.
I know the feeling well. Miriam.
But first today, we're going to take a look at crime, and in particular, the fear of crime. 2 days ago, the government held its annual conference on crime prevention and once again stressed its belief that the risk of crime is actually lower than the public suspect, that serious crimes of violence are comparatively rare, and that the media have contributed to irrational fears, particularly amongst the elderly. In a moment, I'm going to be talking to Trevor Jones, a criminologist who's carried out a lot of research into the fear of crime. But first, I want to talk to one woman who lives in constant fear, and to John Patton, the Minister responsible for crime prevention.
Of all crimes, those against frail old people provoke extreme outrage. Only a tiny percentage of muggings are committed against the elderly. But every time such an appalling and senseless attack appears in the papers, it increases the fear of crime, and it shakes public confidence in government claims that the fight against violent crime is being won. Ethel Raymond was mugged last October while she was on her way home. A car pulled up beside her and a man grabbed her bag. Fortunately, she wasn't hurt, and thanks to her quick thinking and taking down the car number plate, her attackers were arrested the same night. Now, however, she's still plagued by the fear of another attack. Ethel has installed a variety of security measures around her home. To her, the fear of crime is as real as the crime itself.
Hello, Mary. Hello, Ethel. How are you? How nice to see you. Go on in.
Are you more afraid of crime now than you were before the mugging?
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm forever looking over my shoulder. I've only got to go a few yards. And another thing that affects me now is if I hear someone walking behind me quick, I'm wondering who it is. Miriam, what worries me is I'm a bit stronger than some of the old frail people. What would have happened if it had been somebody much frailer than me? What would it have done? Somebody with a heart condition, it could kill them. I mean, it's toll on me. It really has. And I think it's going to take a long time to get over it. But I can honestly tell you I'm fighting back. But
would you go out on your own now at night?
No. No, I wouldn't.
Ethel is not a unique case. In a Gallup poll carried out 2 months ago, it was discovered that 60% of the 11 million people living in Britain today who are over the age of 60 are too frightened to go out on their own after dark, fear of assault being the main reason. Yet the Home Office and the police have consistently failed to give this intense fear of crime much attention. They claim that the risk of crime is far lower than the public might suspect. So how are they going to lessen this fear, which is making many of the elderly prisoners in their own homes?
So, Mr. Grade, over to you.
The government has started by commissioning a fear of crime report, which was launched this week by Michael Grade, chairman of the Independent Working Party. The report listed 40 or so suggestions which could reduce the fear of crime. One of the main recommendations was that the government should place as much emphasis on reducing the fear of crime as on crime prevention itself. So will the Home Office now take the lead?
I think we will build it very much more into our crime prevention
approach, but crime prevention is the business that we're really in, and we're recognised by all countries in the European community as being very much in the lead in trying to get neighbourhoods, through Neighbourhood Watch, for example, to look after each other, and to look after elderly people in particular, because I think elderly people are probably the group in society who suffer most of all from unnecessary fear of crime.
Unnecessary maybe, but real. I mean, what would you say to the people out there who are frightened, too frightened to go out?
Well, I'd say to them one thing. Fear of crime in this country is very much higher than it is in many Western European countries, who may well have crime rates worse than our own.
What does that say about the government having failed to do something about the fear?
I think it says quite a lot about the role of the media, television in particular, and newspapers as well, in reporting crime, which is a perfectly proper thing for the media to do, but doing it in a responsible way. And the whole of the report, Mr. Grade's presentation this morning, was shot through with criticisms of pretty well all our great national newspapers for reporting violent and serious crimes without balancing it by real, genuine data about the risk that people have from that kind of crime. And I think it's very important. I think we all have to put our house in order. If the Home Office has got to do better, well, the media's got to do better, and I'm sure your programme will help in that.
Trevor Jones, is the Minister right when he says the government, the police and the media all need to get their houses in order to reduce this fear of crime?
Well, I mean, to an extent, yes. I mean, it's right to take people's fears seriously, but yet again, the poor old media seems to get it in the neck. Now, obviously, we want responsible media. We don't want irresponsible, worst kind of journalism we've seen. But we have to be very careful here. We have to be very careful there's no interference and that journalists can actually write about crime.
I don't think he's saying that journalists shouldn't write about crime. What he's saying is that 6% actually of all crime is violence against the person, and yet to read the newspapers, watch the telly, it looks like it's happening all the time.
Well, in the inner city areas, it's much higher than 6%. I mean, 6% is just an aggregate or an average figure.
Well, it's a Home Office figure.
It's a Home Office figure.
It's a government figure.
It's a government figure. But obviously, there's a difference in the crime rate, say, in rural Wales and in the city London. It's a considerable difference.
I mean, do you think, you saw Ethel in our film there, she's a 68-year-old woman, she's obviously been mugged and has a right to be frightened. But is there a genuine fear amongst a lot of the elderly?
Oh, very much so. But their fears are not irrational, because although it's very rare for old people to have that kind of terrible experience that Ethel had, obviously older people are more vulnerable. So, you know, to a certain extent, they are right to be wary, and obviously a lot more has to be done.
Why do you think it's taken so long for, say, society to recognise this fear?
I think people in my profession have recognised it, and perhaps we haven't communicated it, you know, more effectively to people. But I think the government, to some extent, is saying that we've now discovered this problem, but one can't get away from the fact that the trend in crime rates is upwards. So it's a question of getting balance. We do need effective measures against crime, but we mustn't get into a position and saying, oh, well, everything's hunky-dory in terms of the crime rate, you know, and all we have to deal with is a fear of crime. I think that would be a serious mistake.
But, I mean, I think a lot of people at home would be amazed to discover that of all the violent crimes, only 0.5% are against people over the age of 60. So isn't the government right not to terrify people, and aren't you wrong to try to be terrifying them?
I certainly wouldn't want to terrify people. Well, you saw one very tragic case, and it's people obviously, you know, need to be protected in some way against the worst, most irresponsible kind of journalism. But at the same time, we need more action. For example, we need more money, particularly in the city areas, to improve the standard of public lighting. Some of the proposals, the Minister's proposals for transport, are very welcome. And this is the kind of action we need.
Great. Well, hopefully that's going to happen after Monday's conference. Thanks, Trevor Jones. I think it's also important to point out once again that crimes of violence are very rare, and they're particularly rare against the elderly.
Thank you, Miriam. If you ever think of Nat King Cole, with which songs do you associate him? Rambling Rose, Stardust, Let There Be Love? There are so many. Well, today our musical guests, who've just returned from a tour of Japan, have picked another of his great hits, Walk In My Baby Back Home. Ladies and gentlemen, the Fairer Sax.